All right. Going live on Instagram and going live on Facebook. I think that we are good. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of two lead faculty for our clinical management of the fitness, athlete, pregnancy, and postpartum. We are an 8-week online course talking about all things female athlete as they transition into trying to conceive to pregnancy to postpartum and return to sport. We have our next online cohort starting at the end of June. And if you're interested in our live course, we are going to be starting a CMFA pregnancy and postpartum live course at the beginning of 2022. So stay tuned for dates and locations. Before I get started on today's podcast, I wanted to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day for those who celebrate, depending on where you're watching around the world. And I hope that you got spoiled on Mother's Day for all my mamas that are listening. And I want to also acknowledge all of my females who are wanting to be mamas, who have lost babies, who are step mamas, who are anyone who identifies as being a mother or a caregiver in any capacity. I hope that you were spoiled or you got the space to, think and reflect it and be with your families and be with loved ones yesterday. Okay, so today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a term that is very, very common across the social media space. And it's this term, postpartum is forever. And I have to admit, I don't really love this. And I'm going to describe it to you in a little bit. If this is a term that has given you some comfort in your postpartum journey or is something that has been very helpful to you, I think that is amazing. I just, in general, for myself and my own beliefs and conceptions around different parts of the postpartum journey, just don't love the overarching theme that this phrase gives off. And let's kind of unpack that a little bit. When we say that postpartum is forever, the idea is that when we give birth, whether we give birth via C-section, vaginal delivery, instrumented delivery, that our body is forever changed. And we can always acknowledge that is true. We are going to have different signs that we have given birth, whether that be a scar or, we know that our introitus gets wider and bigger as we've had vaginal deliveries. Those signs, those experiences, those changes in how our body feels are things that are going to become a part of our new normal. I think we can acknowledge that. When we say the term, however, postpartum is forever, I feel like we latch on to this idea that we aren't going to have a wide range of freedom of movement. When we are trying to return to sport or return to activities postpartum, we acknowledge that, especially in those early months, and most women, when I poll them, they kind of say that they feel like postpartum is anywhere between 9 and 18 months, depending on number of pregnancies and the way that their birth experience went. But we have certain things that we need to consider, right? We can't get cleared at 6 weeks and then start going back right into what we did in our before pregnancy exercise routine. And I think that's fairly acknowledged. However, when we're saying that postpartum is forever, I feel like we're putting this restriction on women or the belief that they are going to be restricted long term. And I don't necessarily think that that is the way that this term was founded or started or thought of. But when I think of postpartum as being forever, it means that I need to hold myself back slightly in exercise and in movement, or I need to be careful. I need to be cautious. I need to, be like thinking about my pelvic floor every time I'm trying to express myself in terms of exercise. And that isn't the type of thing that we want. I've done podcasts in the past where I always say that my goal is to discharge the Kegel, because the pelvic floor and pelvic health system is a reflective practice, and our muscles reflect the changes in intra-abdominal pressure that are being experienced throughout our body with various bodily functions, including lifting weights and having a bowel movement on either sides of the extreme. And so when we're talking about these things, I think it's important for us to kind of conceptualize what that means. When I was going through my own postpartum journey, when I got to about 9 or 12 months, I felt like my pelvic floor wasn't something that I was considering every single time. And I was fairly lucky. I had some mild hypertonicity issues and incontinence issues, and I had a vaginal birth that had mild grade 2 tearing. So I had some things that I was rehabbing, but when I got to a far enough point postpartum, I was able to express a freedom of movement. And so we kind of think about postpartum being forever as pelvic health considerations are forever. And let's try and think about that in terms of other orthopedic injuries. So if you said to somebody who had an MRI that showed a disc bulge, and you said to them, a disc bulge is forever, how would you feel about putting that lens on it? And some people are going to say, it's not exactly the same thing. I know it's not the exact same thing, but when we're thinking about these things, we know that when we use terms like that, or when we use communication strategies like that, it can sensitize a nervous system. And when we sensitize a nervous system, that's when we can get into this chronic pain loop, or this chronic hyper awareness of an injury site that can really negatively impact a person's quality of life. It can make people so afraid of re-injury that they decondition. There's a lot of these negative soliloquies that can happen in our healthcare system. And I think the same can be true with this postpartum is forever, where we are considering that we have these tools and strategies, right? So if you have acute low back pain, you're not going to say that your low back pain is forever, but you are going to teach your client different skills, strategies, techniques that if they do have a flare up in pain, we're going to say, it's okay. Those types of things can happen. We taught you the skills that when you are experiencing a flare up in pain, these are some of the things that you can do. Your body is strong. Your body is resilient, and eventually that pain will flare down and you will be able to go on with your normal activities. The same is true with pelvic health, right? Like we have had a very transformational process that happens. We need to respect where your body is as we return from a major surgery or a major injury to the pelvic floor, which happens during vaginal birth. And we need to respect that timeline. We need to make sure that we are putting the foundations in place, that we rehab that injury. And then eventually you can let go of some of those considerations. If you have a flare up in symptoms, whether that be pelvic heaviness, pelvic pain, incontinence, some of those things that are more widely talked about in the pelvic world, you have these strategies that we have used to help you rehab, but your body is strong, your body is resilient. These symptoms don't have to last forever, and we will be able to help you through those. And so the postpartum is forever, I almost feel like the acknowledgement of the fact that motherhood is so transformative. And I love that I'm doing this podcast the day after Mother's Day, because in my mind, it's like motherhood is forever, right? Like the changes that have happened in your body are just like some of the permanent changes if you had a partial tear of your rotator cuff that isn't surgically repaired. Those types of things doesn't mean that you're going to have shoulder pain forever. It means that you're going to have these signs of the different phases and the different experiences that you have gone through in your life, and it's going to be reflected on some of your images on the inside, just like age is reflected on wrinkles on the outside. And we're going to use that as, we're going to take some considerations into play. We're going to seek medical interventions if we need them to manage symptoms, but motherhood is forever. You are always a mother. You're always going to be thinking about your little one, which maybe is not a little one anymore. But I love the phrase motherhood is forever, because, you know, your brain physically changes when you transition into motherhood to consider this little human that you're trying to keep alive. And I remember going home from the hospital and thinking, you're going to let me just try and keep this human alive. I can't believe it. But I don't, bringing it back, I just don't love the postpartum is forever, because I think it creates this hold around caution. And I think that eventually we want to be able to allow women to express freedom of movement. And if we have issues, injuries, things that come up, we address those. We make sure that we respect the process postpartum. But I do not want a mom who's rehabbed appropriately in the first 12 to 18 months postpartum and is now 3 years postpartum to be worried about lifting weights, especially if she's asymptomatic, to be worried about running after her toddler because all of a sudden she's like, postpartum is forever, I could have a prolapse. Like those types of things, even though that's not the intention, can end up being skewed like a bad case of telephone that allows or prevents women from being able to express their full toolbox of movement because they're worried that they can't do that. And even from myself being in a very informed place, in that first 12 to 18 months, I never was as aggressive against the barbell because I was always afraid that something was going to happen. Even though I knew that my body was strong, my body was resilient. So coming from a very informed place and still knowing that feel of that tug pulling me back. And if you guys follow me on social media, you probably think that I wasn't doing that, but mentally I was overcoming that loop all the time, even though I knew how strong and resilient a woman's body was, or that there are that you know what, I'm going to be giving birth to a second child and that I'm at an 8 times increased risk of having a prolapse. That is something, that's a statistic that I know. That is just unfortunately some of the statistics around motherhood and transitions into motherhood with multi-parity. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be able to return to the activities that I love, even if there is some changes that are shown throughout my body as I transition into motherhood again. And so I kind of just wanted to loop this around and compare this to some of the other orthopedic injuries. We would never say a shoulder injury is forever. We would never say that back pain is forever. We would never say that a meniscus pathology is forever. So I don't want to have our world in pelvic health say, you know, pelvic health pathologies are forever. Yes, we may have changes like in prolapse where we have descent of pelvic organs towards the vaginal opening, but back pain isn't forever, even if you still have a protrusion on MRI. And so it's really important that we think about the way that we're communicating and really try to reframe some of our postpartum care in we're going to consider this, but you are strong, you are resilient. My goal is to empower you to explore movement in the way that you love, and I'm going to help facilitate that. And if we have hiccups, I am here to coach and counsel you. And that way we can really use those tips and tricks to help women explore movement in whatever way they see fit. All right, that is my podcast episode for today. I would love to know, do you agree with me? Do you think that I'm a little off the mark? What are your thoughts when you hear the word postpartum is forever? Do you see that as something that's very positive? Maybe I'm just seeing it in a different light. Do you see it as something that's negative? Do you see it as something that is neutral? Have you not really thought about it in the past? I would love to hear all of your thoughts. And you can comment them below if you're on Facebook or Instagram. If you're listening to this in the podcast, I would love for you to DM me, Christina_Previtt on Instagram. And I would love to know your thoughts, because these types of things and how we're thinking about communication in different areas of PT practice, I think are ever evolving. And I probably think about it way too much, but I would love to hear from you. If you're interested, our next CMFA pregnancy and postpartum, our summer cohort starts June 28th. We would love to have you on board. We've had our last couple Our last couple cohorts have all sold out, which is so wonderful to see you all getting more involved in this space. And if you have any questions about the course, live or online, just let me know. Otherwise, have a wonderful beginning to your week, and we will talk soon.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.